I wanted to start by acknowledging there are two really, really important holes in the human body. There's a lot of holes all over, like tons of these tiny little holes. The pores, which allow us to perspire, allow our skin to breathe. Bigger holes include the two in the nose, breathing in air, smelling things. But really, if worse comes to worse, if they get plugged up, you still have a mouth to breathe out of, and not having a sense of smell would suck, be a drag, but you'd survive. Your eyes are kind of like holes. Eyes fit into two holes in your skull. If you lose your eyes, again, very, very difficult. But any blind person can tell you it's very possible to live without the eyes. And we can continue our survey of human holes and find one on each side of your head. These holes usually have these weird fleshy protuberances called ears, obviously. Very strange looking things if you look at them long enough. But again, you can live if these holes are not there. But when we get to the mouth and the anus, these I think they're really important holes. These are survival level holes. They need to be kept open, and you need to have building materials and water flowing in and waste flowing out. Obviously, not all the waste leaves that big A hole. You need another hole, but let's set that one aside, the hole for the urine to leave. So I think we have a pretty complete picture of holes at this point. And of course, anybody who thinks about it, you're going to recognize that when you put some food in your mouth and start chewing it, you are taking action at the top of a very long tube. You decide to put the food in, you decide to chew, and you decide to swallow. That's how digestion begins. But then, in a way, you're done. At least the conscious part of you. Once you're done chewing and swallowing, the journey down that pretty long tube begins. An average digestive tube is about 8 meters long, although I found estimates varied a lot. But let's say 24 feet, 8 meters. That's a pretty long way. If you took that whole tube out, mouth to asshole, and stretched it out, it would be 4 or 5 times as long as you are. But the thing is, you swallow and then you sign off. All the digestion, all the transformation of food to essentially nutrition and shit. All that happens without any conscious intervention. Our bodies are so well organized, so wonderfully autonomous, that from the swallow to the feeling of, I'm going to have to release some shit soon. From swallow to shit, your body handles the whole thing. Maybe that's why it's so easy to sign off from dealing with shit. We already have signed off from digesting our food. And so it seems normal to sign off from dealing with shit. I mean, people will just do their business, clean themselves, flush, and forget. But no, I've thought about it. I don't think it's that. I just don't buy it that we want to remain unconscious about our shit. I mean, maybe we do, but I think there's a profound status situation involved with shit. I think for people, having a flush toilet is too close to living like royalty. It's the one taste a lot of people get of living like a king or queen or emperor or whoever the rich, powerful people are of the day. They've been like that through history. Those people never haul their own shit out to the compost or wherever the royal shit went. Shit handling in many cultures was and is a very, very low status position. I think a lot of people are genuinely relieved not to have to deal with their shit. I mean, literally, they don't have to deal with it. Even if it means releasing their shit into their own supply of water. We genuinely want to. We think this is a great idea. We think it's good to release our poops into fresh water. The water piped to our toilet is often the same water piped to our sinks to drink. Maybe through a filter, but maybe not. We use that same piped water for cooking and cleaning. It's the same water we take a shower in. We have arranged to pee and poop into fresh water and then flush it away. Very glad not to have to deal with our pee or poop or the water we just contaminated. Before modern plumbing became possible, most people did have to deal with it one way or another, or have a servant or a slave deal with it. You can see how clearly status can be established by designating who has to deal with shit and who doesn't. This very moment, the moment you are listening to this podcast, is a moment when someone, somewhere, perhaps even yourself, someone is shitting into a bowl of water. Everyone else, unless they are 3 or 4 days into a strict fast, everyone else has eaten enough to have the beginnings of their next shit forming inside their body. Our society and our culture have entered into a giant conspiracy to ignore where our shit goes. This is an aspect of any present moment you find yourself in. We have all tacitly agreed not to think or talk about it very much at all. How deeply are any of us able to care for ourselves, for each other, and for our planet? How deeply can we care? What is the nature of our caring when we all make shit every day and want to completely ignore where this very physical truth, where does it go? Most of us flush all our shit away and don't even know where it goes. I don't. But just because you ignore something doesn't mean it isn't there. Why is it so easy to be grateful for what we put into our mouths? It's so easy to say a prayer for our food. Our bodies were designed to create poop. Let's be grateful. Let's be grateful about our poop. My idea with this episode is to encourage each of us to discover a genuine prayer for our own poop. A prayer similar to the prayers for the food that we put in our mouth that started this whole thing. And that's what I want to talk about today. Hello and welcome to the 10 Crutches podcast. My name is David. I'm glad you're here. This episode, by the way, is a riff off some ideas I found in the book Hospicing Modernity by Vanessa Machado de Oliveira. I hope I'm saying that correctly. I'll put a link to her book in the show notes. I'm going to also put a link there for a book called Humanure, which is also a great book. Show notes for this episode and all episodes can be found on my podcast website at 10crutches.link. That's 10crutches.link. It's pretty common to say a prayer before eating a meal. There are a lot of families, a lot of gatherings of people where it makes sense to maybe hold hands together around the table and say something about how grateful we are for this food, this meal we're about to share. We acknowledge the food and perhaps the labor that went into growing the food, the efforts of preparing the food. We acknowledge this amazing situation where we can continue our survival because we are able to feed ourselves. If you believe in God, then you thank God for the food. If you don't believe in God, maybe you just say thanks to the universe. However it is for you. Everyone knows what it's like to say a prayer and then eat. But very few people, I imagine, say a prayer for their poop. Well, As some of you know, I'm a retired hospice nurse, and I did have some patients at some times who were constipated. They prayed for a poop. It's a little different than what I'm talking about. Their gratitude was for the poop being able to come out at all. But their celebration, which was the right word sometimes, their celebration was a relief of a very personal discomfort. That's understandable. I get that kind of prayer, but that's not what I'm talking about. I'm saying here that when we say a prayer for receiving our food, we're grateful for receiving the nutrition and the sustenance we need to survive. But how easy is it to ignore that our poop is sustenance as well? It's just that I'm usually so self-centered, so deeply self-centered. If it's not sustenance for me, who cares? My poop is returning, or at least potentially returning, essential sustenance to the earth, the very earth that provides for me. My meals are borrowing. I'm borrowing material in the form of food, and I have the potential to return what I don't immediately need in the form of shit. Poop forms inside us, and then we release it. I never did understand people that said, I'm gonna take a shit. You're gonna take a shit? Take it where? Seems to me much more accurate to say, I'm gonna release a shit. Why are we saying prayers for the food going in, but not saying prayers for the poop coming out? Poop is incredibly important, but we're so self-centered. But just because it's made of all kinds of stuff you literally don't need anymore, and will literally kill you if it just keeps building up inside you, it isn't you who needs it. But I mean, come on, get your head out of your butt. That's the ironic phrase around this issue. Having your head up your butt, it means you're self-centered. If your head could actually be up your butt, when you looked around, all you would be able to see is the inside of yourself. In fact, the title of episode 20 of this podcast is called Getting Your Head Out of Your Butt. In other words, stop looking only at what you need. You don't need your poop, but the rest of the earth needs your poop. Other humans need your poop. Indirectly, you need it too. The richness that poop can add back to the land will make all our food more nutritious. The earth needs the nutrition. It needs poop to return to the soil. But if you're like me, you just don't really know what happens when you go into the toilet and poop and flush the water away. It goes to some treatment plant, and hopefully some competent people separate the poop and the urine from the water. But what a lot of extra steps. Where does the separated poop go? Why isn't it easier to find out? Why isn't it easier to care? What the hell are we doing? For many, many people, the truth is we don't want to smell our own shit. Certainly don't want to smell other people's shit. We do not want to deal directly with shit. We don't want to be responsible, literally, for our own shit. In fact, one way to tell that you're a civilized person is that a quote-unquote civilized person shits into a toilet. A civilized person shits into clean water and flushes it away and doesn't know where it goes. That's how you know you're civilized. I hope at least some of my listeners are living in a what's called back to the earth community and have a compost toilet. Or maybe you shit into a bucket and sprinkle some sawdust on it. I've done that many times. A compost bucket, it mitigates the possibility of disease. That is a concern. As I mentioned earlier, there's a book called Humanure, Human Manure, and that explains a lot how to safely compost your own shit. And I know the usual arguments. When there were no flush toilets, people were handling shit and they often weren't careful. It's very easy for diseases to spread. That's true. And that's why it made sense at the time to require flush toilets. It's more sanitary. Who needs cholera, et cetera, et cetera. And all those indigenous people, the colonizing people wanted to have a way to separate themselves from them and didn't really want to follow those ways of living much closer to the land. We wanted to live in big cities. We wanted to live away from all that. And I don't know, I still don't think that's why our culture ignores shit. Nobody wants to deal with shit, even though they make it every day. What is this about? I think praying for our poop is a start to turning around this profound ignorance. We can be conscious of what we are about to do when we prepare to release a shit back into the world. We can pause and reflect on our interconnectedness. We can manifest our intimate intertwining with all that exists. We can, even if we're shitting into a toilet, even if we honestly don't know where it's going, we can still wish our poop well on its journey away from us. We can breathe, maybe breathe through your mouth, into the fact that we remain ignorant about where our poop is going, ignorant about what will happen to it. We can feel the physical reality of our bodies and the naturalness of our shitting. Maybe your prayer will even include something about all of us humans becoming better managers of our shit, better managers of this manifestation of our humanness. Shit is something we all have in common, the richest of the rich and the poorest of the poor. We all have to eat and we all have to shit. When I look at myself, one of so many people ignoring where my shit is going, I realize it's not so surprising the world is way out of balance. Shitting into fresh water, that's the best we can come up with? There is limited drinkable water in the world, and we have nothing better to do with it than to pipe it around in huge systems to flush our smelly shit away? This is a real statement about who we are and what we consider important, and about what we refuse to deal with. To me, I look at our planet warming up, and then I look at the way our elected officials of the United States, our current government, is trying to prevent a transition to wind and solar. Our elected government is instead trying to burn as much oil and coal as possible. I can only imagine our country in this regard. It's kind of like an addict in some gutter, writhing in pain, desperately praying for one more injection of the, oh, please satisfy my greed drug, and not caring what damage they have to do to get that drug into them. Please consider saying a prayer for your fecal matter. I propose we each bless our poop. We wish it well as we return it to the rest of the world. We try to be as conscious as possible about what we are doing. Shit is smelly, stinky. It makes so much sense. It's so much easier. You just make a face and go, oh, I don't want to have to deal with that. And then you're done. You don't have to deal with it in a way. But just because you ignore poop, it exists. You exist and your shit exists, intertwined forever. Okay, so here is my prayer for my poop. Dear all that exists, thank you for creating me. And thank you for creating my need to eat. I can see that existence in its profound wisdom and intelligence has created a pile of shit resting right here, just inside my asshole. This shit contains what is left of the food I ate, food that came from the land, food that I gratefully put into my body. This shit is a waste product from my personal point of view, but it's not a waste from the great Earth's point of view. This shit is the land. This shit is needed by the land. Nothing can be thrown away or really flushed away because there's no away to flush it to. With awareness of my interconnectedness, I pray that this pile of shit about to come out of my ass finds its way back to the earth with as little damage to the earth as possible. I pray that this shit is helpful to the rest of the earth and helps new life to grow. Thank you so much for listening. I'll see you next time. Please visit the home of the 10 Crutches podcast at 10crutches.link. That's 10crutches.link. The book that inspired the podcast, a book I wrote called 10 Crutches for Walking in the Present, is available for free download on the website. Also on the website, you can visit the archive to hear any published episode and see show notes for any and every show. Thanks so much for listening, and once again, thanks so much for listening, and I won't say it once again. See you next time.